Welcome to episode 4 of the Kawasaki KLX 143 big bore pit bike build that one of you will win. If you're new here, the engine is already complete. We started with a clapped out old 2005 KLX 110 and we're upgrading it in every way imaginable to make this a badass pit bike that is ready to take some serious abuse. Congratulations to the 2 winners of these Fathead Racing gas caps. These will get shipped out today. Thank you to Fathead Racing for sponsoring the Pro Circuit exhaust system for this build, and we've also got some custom exhaust graphics from DeCal Works to make this pipe match the look of the bike. To start today's episode off, I've got a 2022 plastic kit courtesy of MXPlastics.com, and we're going to make this kit bolt right up to this 2005 frame. To begin, the rear fender requires some modifications as this 05 does not have a battery, thus does not need or have space for the battery box. After some quick measurements, I chopped the battery box out using my Milwaukee rotary tool. With that fender modified as necessary, I did a test fit, and note I did buy a brand new 2022 fuel tank in order for this to work. Everything fit nicely aside from a few mods we need to make to the frame to actually bolt these plastics up. I headed over to my buddy Ben's shop, who generously offered his help, and we got to work. We began with a little CAD, or cardboard aided design as Ben coined it, in order to design the brackets that we needed to add to the frame for the shrouds to bolt onto. We then matched this cardboard design over a piece of steel and cut those out with the angle grinder. Ben smoothed out the edges of that new bracket using the angle grinder and then tested alignment to ensure we got it right before center punching where the hole would go and drilling that out with the drill press. Ben cut threads into the piece of steel as this steel is thick enough that we were able to avoid having to weld a nut onto the back of it or anything like that. To finish these brackets off, Ben cleaned up the edges using the belt sander. After grinding the factory paint off of the frame where the tab would be welded, it was time to attach this new bracket to the frame. I got a quick crash course in welding as I was going to try the second bracket.
So pretty much what we're gonna do is you want the tip of the wire kind of touching where you're gonna weld, and then you'll start to see it kind of pull up. You'll move that puddle, it's called like dragging the puddle, you'll like drag it up the crack where you want it to be welded.
Ben finished up the welds for that first bracket and then grinded it all down so it was smooth.
We got one on, one to go.
Certified welder.
Next up, it was my turn to take what Ben had just taught me and form the second bracket. So if you happen to win this bike, it might be obvious which side Ben handled and which side I handled, but I can say with some level of confidence, it'll be strong enough to hold the shroud plastics on.
Well, that might be a little far, but it'll do.
Now with those 2 tabs welded on, we had one more task. The side panel tabs needed to be moved back about ½ an inch to align properly with the new plastics. While we watch Ben masterfully take care of this, I want to talk a little bit about what Ben does and offers. Ben is an awesome, down-to-earth guy who also loves to ride dirt bikes, and his business is Lone Peak Precision. Lone Peak Precision is a rapid prototyping manufacturer that delivers affordable prototype parts in days instead of weeks. From fishing products to dirt bike parts to high-tech laser components and everything in between, Lone Peak Precision can help you bring your designs to life. And voila! I threw one more weld on there, and boy, do I need to get a welder, but we now have 2022 plastics on a 2005 KLX frame that bolt right up. Seeing these white plastics on the frame makes me think that purple is the right choice for the frame color, but before sending the frame out, I just couldn't wait any longer to see this beautiful custom exhaust sticker from DeCal Works on this new Pro Circuit pipe. How epic is this thing going to look all tied together? Along with the exhaust sticker comes a brand new seat cover, and while this all black cover does look nice on this tall BBR seat, this custom seat cover from DeCal Works, again, is just going to tie the whole bike together so beautifully. This is getting me fired up to show you the custom graphics kit for this bike, but for that, you will have to wait for a future episode. So if you haven't yet clicked that subscribe button, be sure to do so. And remember, you can win this bike by entering on my website via the link in the description. It was now time to get this grimy frame degreased and cleaned up in preparation for Cerakoting. I soaked it in a warm degreaser bath, and while I let all that grime break loose, I moved on to this BBR swing arm. I removed all of the components as well as the bearings so this could be coated as well. Finally, I had this brand new Mikuni VM26 carb to disassemble, as you guys let me know in the comments of the last video that I should indeed get the carb coated. Once I had each of the carb components removed and organized, I moved back to the frame where I scrubbed all of that loosened dirt and grime
and I actually hit it with the power washer for a while too. With everything degreased and ready to go, here is the final batch of Cerakote parts. The Mikuni VM26 carb, which will be a black and purple combo, the larger BBR intake to accept this carb, which will be black, the BBR swing arm, which is actually offered in black, but at the time I thought I would be leaving silver, although now seeing everything together, I've decided will be black as well, and then finally, the purple frame. Which means that it's time to start wrapping up the other components on the bike so this thing is ready to assemble as soon as I get that frame back. We've got brand new heavy duty rims and spokes from BBR so these wheels will hold up to a beating, along with tubes and tires from Tusk. You guys know I've been rocking Shinko tires for years, although they do not offer mini bike tires, and Tusk makes a great tire as well. I coated the spoke threads with anti-seize lubricant and began lacing the front wheel. Now I've never laced pit bike wheels, and let me tell you, they're not real fun. With big bikes, you get into a rhythm, complete the pattern, and voila, your wheel is built. Not the case with these ones, at least for me on my first attempt. For one, the OEM rim had a left-hand spoke pattern while this new rim had a right-hand spoke pattern, so the lacing process was slightly different, and with the bend of the spokes, I had to be so particular in the order of operations, ensuring spokes were overlapping properly and had room to get to their respective locations on the rim, and I had this thing apart 3 or 4 times before I finally got it right. I legitimately spent 5 hours on the front wheel. I did end up calling BBR, who was very helpful in sending over some photos of a properly laced wheel for reference. The rear wheel went much more smoothly, and I believe I had that one laced in under an hour, and then I trued both of them using my Tusk truing stand. Getting the initial tightening on these spokes was a little annoying as the heads of the nipples are flat blades, and I much prefer when spoke nipples accept an Allen or a Phillips, as using a drill speeds up this initial process a lot, and it's pretty difficult to do it without slipping with those flat blade heads. That said, I managed to get it done, and these wheels are looking damn good. I installed some new OEM damper rubbers as the old ones were nearly 20 years old and worn out, and then I installed a new Tusk bearing and seal before mounting the Cerakoted rear sprocket. At this point, we were ready for some tires. Now I do not have the Raviconda mini bike tire changer, so I'm doing some really precise construction of a tire changing stand right here that'll fit the mini bike tires. I've actually never done a tire this small, and I've heard they're a total pain, so we'll see how this goes. But this stand has been measured to perfection, so should work well. I lubed up the tubes with some Murphy's mixed with water, and for both front and rear, I will be adding rim locks. Pit bikes do not come stock with rim locks, but when you put a grown adult on one, hitting jumps and railing corners, they're pretty essential to avoid ripping valve stems out of tubes. These BBR rims already have a second hole for a rim lock, so I did not have to do any drilling. I was actually very pleased with how tire installation went. I really didn't struggle or run into any hiccups here, which was a breath of fresh air given how long I spent lacing the front wheel. I just had to be precise in making sure the tire was over the rim lock on both sides. From there, it was smooth sailing, and I just paid close attention in order to not pinch the tube while taking any bites, as that is never fun.
That was not so bad. I accidentally put 60 psi in that.
Taking note of how quickly a tiny pit bike tube accepts air, I was lucky I didn't blow that tube with 60 pounds of pressure, and I would be a little more careful on the rear. Thankfully, rear tire install was smooth as well, again with the biggest struggle being getting around that rim lock, but it was no problem. I ended up using my bead breaker on my Raviconda to aid in my final bite, and I now have 2 complete and beautiful KLX 143 wheels. Now, ever since I started building bikes, I've always thought it would be cool to have all of the major components ready and then do the complete assembly all in one go. But I usually end up waiting on something or missing something, and it makes sense to continue progress and start assembling the bike. That said, I'm thinking this pit bike could be the bike to do it on. With these wheels complete, the last major component to finish is the suspension, and then I essentially have everything I need to put this entire bike together as soon as I get the frame back. Mikey over at Deja Moto assisted in spring removal from this shock, as the spring was too long to simply remove by loosening the preload adjuster, and a spring compressor was required. The only change I'm making here is the color of the spring, so I stripped the powder coating off with Pryme MX wheels, starting with the flap wheel and moving to the coarse cleaning wheel. I was able to rip all of the powder off from the outside edges, and then I blasted the spring in my blast cabinet. Being a shock spring, an anodized look is pretty cool in my opinion, so I opted for some duplicolor metal cast purple. I brought the shock assembly and freshly painted spring back to Mikey, who quickly made up a collar in his lathe to install this spring without scratching up the fresh paint. Big thanks to Mikey for his help with this one. This is a DNM shock, which is a solid upgrade from stock, has rebound adjustment, and will be set up for a 170-pound rider to hit jumps confidently on this bike. Once that shock was finished up, I was ready to tackle the fork assembly. These forks have an array of new parts, including heavy-duty springs from BBR compared there to stock, extended damper rods from BBR, which are longer than stock, Thai nitride-coated stanchions from a company called Cop & Sting in Australia, along with new Tusk fork seals, and lastly, the lowers Cerakoted by Canaan lasers. These forks are relatively simple, with a whole lot less going on than big bike forks. I was able to drive the new seal in after applying some suspension grease, simply using a large socket. I installed the new damper rods into the stanchion and then the stanchion into the lower, and using the 14mm hex that I modified during teardown to work, I was able to tighten that assembly together. After adding 15 weight fork oil to a height of 89mm as suggested by BBR, it was time to install the new heavy-duty spring, which I was definitely nervous about. While this was undoubtedly a difficult one-person job, check out how I managed to get it done.
Yes, one down. Method was glove, sponge folded in half to relieve some of the pressure from the extension on my palm, and then we just willed her on in there. Ow.
With one fork complete, I repeated the exact same process for the second fork, which did not take me too long. Both forks complete, check out how sexy these things are. I'm now realizing more and more how hard it's going to be to let one of you guys win this thing instead of just keeping it for myself.
All right, guys, so we made some crazy good progress in this one. All of the major components for the bike are built and ready to go, looking absolutely incredible, if I do say so myself. So as soon as Miles over at Canaan Lasers Cerakotes that frame and gets it back to me, it is go time. We're ready to get this thing assembled. I am getting really excited to get this thing running and take it for a spin. I have never ridden a souped up pit bike before, and this thing is going to absolutely rip. And I'll be honest, right now I think there's somewhere around 150 people entered to win this thing, so your odds are crazy good. Hopefully seeing all this come together, you see how sweet this pit bike's gonna be. Entering to win this thing is a great way to support the channel and allow me to keep doing what I'm doing here. If you make purchases on RockyMountainATVMC.com, if you use my link in the description, I earn a commission on those purchases, so that is a great way to support the channel as well. I really hope you guys are enjoying this build so far. Having never done a pit bike, so much of this has been new to me, which is refreshing and really exciting. So you can get yourself entered to win this thing via direct entries on my website, or you can get yourself some merch, which also enters you for a chance to win the bike. Thank you all so much for watching, and if all goes well, we might get this thing running in episode 5. See you next time.